the kind of mistake is thinking that grip strength is the goal. It's just a predictor. A lot of focus on strength right now as kind of being your salvation for longevity. And that's not necessarily accurate.
So my goal for this episode is we can talk about what the ideal is as far as exercise and fitness goes and some of the mistakes people make. But I also really want to give folks some tips on how to optimize the time that they spend. So if you only have, say, 30 minutes, maybe you are still working. You don't have 2 hours to spend on it. Like, how do we optimize that 30 minutes that you're spending?
Sounds like a good plan.
Well, hi there, Amy here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Cody Sipe, who I met back in, I want to say it was like 2014. You were presenting at a conference about training people 50 and older, right? The boomers at that point.
That's right.
And I thought the presentation was great. And then I found out that you were the co-founder of the Functional Aging Institute with Dan Ritchie. And Dan's been on this podcast before.
Good.
Jackie from Evolution Fitness has also been on. So you were missing in the equation. I had to get you on.
Well, apparently so. You just kind of kept me in the sidelines here.
No, I invited you. It took a while to get... But I'm so glad that we were able to fit into your busy schedule. So again, thank you for making the time.
Absolutely.
I think maybe just to start with, how did you wind up, what's the story behind becoming a co-founder of the Functional Aging Institute? What's the interest there?
Well, I'll tell you what, I had virtually no interest in older adults growing up. And as far as my beginning career aspirations went, in fact, I had very few interactions with older adults, and most of them were somewhat negative, to be honest, like going into nursing homes and that sort of thing. But when I started my master's program in clinical exercise physiology, we ran a program that was a cardiac rehab program on campus for older adults, and had a great experience, loved it, loved all the participants, and just saw a different side of, I think, aging than what I've been exposed to before. And so it kind of opened up my eyes. So then when I went in to get my PhD, I just naturally kind of steered away from more of the chronic disease and just focused on functional aging or successful aging. And, what do older adults need to do to just live awesome lives for as long as possible? And at that point, there was some big evidence that had come out rather recently that was kind of pushing this field along, and people thinking, hey, there's a lot more to getting older than just sitting on the sidelines and sitting in a rocking chair and giving in or succumbing, right? And so that's what really kind of sparked my interest. And as I went through my PhD, I worked with multiple groups in clubs and in universities, and just fell in love with kind of this area.
So what is your PhD in?
It's in health and kinesiology, and I had a concentration in aging.
Okay. All right. So what was the difference between this group that you were working with and the exposure you had?
Well, I'll tell you, the one experience that really stands out to me from my younger years was when our church youth group went to sing in a nursing home, and it was your traditional old school nursing home. And I remember as we kind of piled in, I got to the door and I stopped at the door because the smell hit me before I even went in. And I kind of stopped, and my friends would kind of push me in. And it was just, your typical experience of there people in wheelchairs in the hallways with bibs kind of drooling on themselves, rather incoherent, couldn't communicate. And so we kind of sang some songs for the residents, and afterwards had some, again, not too positive interactions. And since I didn't really have grandparents around to kind of hang out with, that's kind of what I thought aging was. Like, oh, don't get old. This is bad stuff, right? And so that's what turned it around for me when I got into this master's program. People were so vibrant and witty and funny and energetic, and they were healthy and they were functional. Like, despite having multiple bypasses, they were just lovely people and very active. And we even, when we started our program at 5:30 in the morning, there were farmers there who were leaving. They were already done with their workout. So completely different experience. And then as I went from that into working with other groups, I realized, yes, there are two potential realities of aging. One which does lead down that path of poor health and disability and reduced function and whatnot, but another that is more vibrant, creative, healthy, and that's what I saw that people could become if they especially chose the right lifestyle choices and behaviors.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're doing lifestyle wise puts us on a trajectory, right? And so I was actually at brunch with some friends the other day, and I heard one person say, I'm 60 years old now. So there's always the conversations about aches and pains. And
Right.
one person was actually getting ready to retire. And somehow the subject of the aches and pains came up. And um, I heard someone say, it doesn't get any better. It only gets worse.
Yeah,
And I actually paused and like, nah, I want to challenge that. I think it
good.
depends on what you're doing. So yeah, if you keep doing what you're doing and you have all these aches and pains and your lifestyle isn't supporting health, right?
Hmm.
It's kind of like death by a thousand cuts. You keep
Yeah,
adding insult after insult. But if you do change, I think the trajectory can change as well, right?
yeah. I often say that most people really don't know how good they can feel
Mm,
or how healthy they could be because we don't ever really give it a long enough effort, a complete enough effort, a comprehensive effort. We nibble at it. We try something here and there, and oh, it doesn't work. It wasn't comfortable. It didn't feel good. And so we stop doing those things. And I think especially older adults who have not been active and haven't really led healthy lifestyles, they have the most to gain, right? I mean, you see people that make humongous turnarounds. I love watching Growing Boulder, and they interview a lot of senior athletes, like sprinters, 90-year-old
yeah,
sprinters.
yeah.
And you think, oh, well, they've been sprinters their whole life. And most of the time, the story is, I didn't do bupkis, but sit on my butt until I was in my 60s. And then I decided to do something, got into sprinting or pole vaulting or long jumping or something crazy. You're like, what happened? And I realized how good exercise made me feel and how healthy I could be. Like they made a really concerted effort. So I'm glad you challenged those stereotypical negative comments that people come up with because they really are kind of just red herrings. They're not true.
Yeah. I mean, the science bears that out. There's
Correct.
plenty of evidence for that. And I actually think a lot of it has to do with so if you are retiring, how do you spend your time during retirement too?
Yes.
Because as people if they retire and they finally have the time to do the things that when they were working, they didn't have. I think
Hmm.
I had plenty of people when I owned the health club who were like, I'm healthier and fitter now than I was in my 40s when I was
Right.
working.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and we're trying to change the language from retirement to something more like refirement. What are you going to refire? What are you going to change? Where are your passions and energies going to go now? Instead of just, oh, I'm giving up this whole thing I've done and now I'm not going to do anything. No, channel that energy somewhere that's a lot more fun, that you can be passionate about. So,
yeah, yeah. So when we talk about then retirement, if you are, you have this almost clean slate, if you will, of what you're going to do with your time, right? Restructuring
mhm.
how you spend your time. I thought, since I have you here, I really want to pick your brain. So my goal for this episode is we can talk about what the ideal is as far as exercise and fitness goes and some of the mistakes people make. But I also really want to give folks some tips on how to optimize the time that they spend. So if you want to spend 2 hours a day, what would you spend your time doing? But if you only have, say, 30 minutes, maybe you are still working. You don't have
Right.
2 hours to spend on it. Like, how do we optimize that 30 minutes that you're spending? Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay. All right. So when we talk about exercise, what is the ideal?
Well, the ideal is going to vary from person to person because of individual needs. So the ideal program would be one that does target the individual person's, I'm going to say, issues or glaring weaknesses or deficits that they have. So some people are going to be a little bit stronger. Some people be weaker. Some people have better flexibility or balance or mobility, whatever. Some are going to be worse. So it does depend on the individual.
Okay.
That's one thing. But in general, obviously, it's going to include a mix of activities that includes cardiovascular aerobic exercise, strength and power training, some sort of balance training, and stimulation for your brain. I think those are the things that we want to put together in an ideal program and do regularly.
Okay. So, like, you hear guidelines around how much cardio to get per week.
Mhm.
So, do you still then support the, like, cardio is 150 minutes of moderate intensity? If you can do vigorous exercise, you could bring that down to 75 minutes per
Right.
week, right? And then strength training. I think actually most people understand the different kinds of cardio they can do. So whether it's running, jogging, brisk walking, when we talk about moderate intensity, we're trying to get you to the point where you can still talk, but it's not these long sentence
Right.
conversations, right? You're a little breathless.
Hmm.
When it's vigorous, you're not even doing that, right? And that's like maximal effort for short bursts of time usually.
Hmm.
So I would like to focus on the strength and the balance stuff with you because I think that's kind of like your wheelhouse. Am I
Hmm.
wrong?
No, that's right.
Okay. So, can you talk about in a strength program, what are the things that we're looking for? So, you mentioned mobility as an
Mhm.
example. Yeah.
Well, I think ultimately, as we kind of look towards the future for all of us, we want to think about, well, 10, 20, 30 years from now, what kind of life am I able to live? How functional am I? How can I move? How well can I do things? The things that I enjoy that give life purpose and meaning, that's what we want. So we're not talking about taking an approach that's going to turn you into a bodybuilder or, some competitive weightlifter. Completely different focus and program that you look at there. But we do want to have a program that's going to focus on some of these intermediary effects of building strength and building power, but in a functional way. So building on those things in a way that's kind of usable. And it's also, again, not overwhelming for people to participate in. But what's interesting about the research is you think about optimal and then you can think about minimal and or doable.
Okay.
And even the minimal program has benefits, especially for older adults. So once you get over 60, most people are losing muscle, they're losing strength, losing power, losing mobility. And even if they were to get on a program of machines and a very basic, I'm going to go to this machine and this machine and this machine and do a very basic set, even 1 to 2 sets, that's all it takes on machine. Most people see really significant results from it. They see a lot of improvement. Now, is that going to be optimal for everybody? It's not going to be optimal. But, a lot of researchers will argue for what we call this minimum dose
Mm,
approach to weight training that's being promoted. And that is if we just got more people doing this bare minimum, that's going to be beneficial for them, right? That's going to be helpful. But if you're looking to turn something around, so if you're in your 60s or 70s and you're already having some issues, like climbing stairs might be an issue, or getting off the floor might be an issue, or whatever you're struggling with, you probably need more, right? And you probably need a little bit more targeted approach than just the bare minimum program. So that's where we would talk about maybe doing not only some of those machines, but some things that are more free weights or body weight, like chair stands or squats or step ups or lunges. Those sorts of movements from a kind of a strength and power perspective would be better.
yeah. Well, I think again, people have a sense of what cardio would look
Mhm.
like. I know when I owned the club, strength training was very intimidating for a lot of people.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Hmm.
they would walk into a weight room and not know where to start. And I was like, actually, we can just do body weight. I don't
Yes.
even need the weights per se. So even something like a basic squat, right? You're learning
Hmm.
hinging, you're working big muscle groups, you're working your core. So when it comes to strength training, I actually think form is really important, right? And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about, like, it's from a kinetic change standpoint, I guess, if we were to talk about things like mobility and stability, do you want folks working on that and before they go into like strength and power? Or because I see people go in and all the time, and I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily the best exercise size for you at this point in time.
Right. Yeah. And I would say it depends. And that's going to be my answer to a lot of these
Sure,
questions.
sure.
Is it does depend on a number of factors. Uh, People that go in a little bit too gung ho, they don't know
Hmm.
what they're doing. They might have some, poor form, and then they start to have some problems and issues, and it doesn't feel good, and they stop doing it. And we see, of course, in the gym every January when everybody rushes in to try to change their bad lifestyle in 2 weeks, and it doesn't work, and then they're gone in February. They just didn't have a good plan. They went into it too fast. So I do think that a number of people do need to start with a little bit more mobility, stability, see success, get some more core strength, understand the movements before then they kind of jump into a program. But again, it depends on what type of coaching they're getting, what type of program they're going into, because we'll often start people off on doing squats
Hmm.
or doing deadlift patterns, but they're so regressed, that they're not going to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
So, when people are kind of doing things on their own, it's obviously a little bit more risky. But mobility and stability are certainly two really important components they should work on, at least if not up front, during the whole program, right? The whole way through. And that is one disadvantage from a lot of the machines is a lot of machines are providing this false stability for you, right? They're taking every variable out, which makes them safe.
Hmm.
For some people, that's great. That's what I want. And then for others, are like, well, you probably get more benefit out of doing a body weight or a free weight or a band or a cable or some other type of exercise.
So you say regress. I think in terms of like modifying it so that the person's able to do it
Hmm.
properly and safely. Yeah. And so,
Yeah,
and then,
and I don't even like the term modification because it's you need to do what's right for you right
yeah,
now, right?
yeah,
And if it looks different than somebody else, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's worse. It's a modification because you can't do the real thing. No, this is how you need to do it right now.
yeah. Well, you use the word regress. I think
I
modify
did.
is more neutral. So, anyways, the idea though is to tailor it to the person and where they
Mhm.
are, right? And
Right.
then if they're able to do more, then I think progression, making it more challenging, is also sort of the name of the game. We want to take you from where you are now and help you get a little stronger. Is there a point where you're just in maintenance?
You certainly can be, yes, and some people would disagree with that. They're like, if you're not improving, you're getting worse, and there's always room for more improvement to get stronger, more powerful, whatever. But really, there's a kind of law of diminishing returns, for the effort that you're putting in. Is it really worth the effort to increase your strength by that 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever it is? And what does that mean for you as a person? Like, if you're not competing, then if you're strong enough and you have enough power and mobility and balance to do all the things that you want to do in life easily, then you can probably maintain, and until you start to have some other issues that might mean you change. But that maintenance program, if you're going to stick to it, then do it. Now some people like the challenge; they want to just keep improving. Okay, keep improving. But you don't have to do it just because somebody across the gym or a neighbor or somebody else is completely into fitness and really pushing themselves all the time. That also causes people to go, well, I don't want to get into
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
too much. So
yeah. Well, I just think I go back to your functional aging. We want to be able to do the things we want to do.
That's right. Yeah.
ultimately,
Hmm.
right? So, whatever that fitness program is that would support what it is that you want to do. So, if you have grandkids and they're young and you want to be able to get up and down off the ground with them, what would a training program look like? That might be different from someone who doesn't have grandkids but wants to golf, right?
Right.
Or travel.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
And if you want to do more robust things, like you want to downhill ski, that looks completely different, right? If that's your activity and that's what you love to do, we had a client with a couple knee replacements who his doctor told him never to downhill ski again. He's like, well, I own chalets in two different ski ski resorts, and that's what our family does for the winter. And now my doctor is telling me I can't ski anymore just because I got knee replacements and I'm in my 60s. And we're like, well, do you want to get back to skiing again? He goes, yeah, I'd love to. I was like, well, great. We're not your doctor. We don't have to listen to your doctor. You're the client, right? And we got him back to downhill skiing, an activity he loved. But obviously, the program he was doing was way different than a lot of other clients
Yeah.
because they didn't want to downhill ski. They wanted to play with grandkids and go on trips and do things like that that weren't quite as robust. So yeah, have your goal in mind, and that's what you train towards.
Yeah. So, can you actually maybe let's spend some time and talk about the benefits of the different types of exercise? Like you mentioned four. I heard cardio, strength, balance, and then like cognitive stimulation, right?
Mhm.
So, can you go through those four?
I can. We could
You
talk
just
all day about the benefits of all these because they are extremely robust. The benefits are extremely robust. We actually just did in the class that I teach. Our students just did presentations on different chronic conditions and looked at lifestyle factors and interventions related to them. And, there's one factor that comes back time and time again: exercise, exercise, exercise,
Mhm.
exercise, right?
Yeah.
And from a healthy aging perspective, um, both an aerobic and a strength training program are recommended and beneficial in different ways, right? They're providing different kinds of benefits. So we don't want to view this as, should I do cardio or should I do strength and power? No, you do both, right? That if you're over the age of 50, that should be your approach because they're providing different benefits. Both aerobic fitness and strength and power are both correlated with longevity. A lot of focus on strength right now as kind of being your salvation for longevity. And that's not necessarily accurate. It does take both aerobic fitness and strength. So that's why I encourage both of those. And then balance training is unique in that cardio, if you just do traditional cardio and traditional strength training, it it certainly has a benefit on fall risk and balance, but it's not as robust as you think. And if you really want to work on fall reduction and balance, you have to work on balance, right? So you have to challenge that system or those systems very specifically. And balance training is it's easy. I'm going to say it's easier to do in this that it doesn't require as much effort. Like, so if you think about strength training and I'm lifting something heavy, it takes some effort. Or if I'm trying to go on a jog, it takes some effort. Balance training is pretty easy. Like, it's a low effort activity with a lot of value. So the balance training stuff that we do, people get done with their program and they're like, yeah, it's easy. I'm not all hot and sweaty and worn out. Like, it was easy to do and it was pretty fun. So you really do want to layer all three of these together. They have very distinct benefits for individuals. And then the cognitive component will kind of plays into all three of those kind of types of exercise that we can then build into a program where we're also working on kind of some brain activities and cognitive challenges at the same time that we're doing some of these other exercises.
So, when you talk about actually, when you were talking about strength, I was thinking about all these influencers, right? I think
Mhm.
60 Minutes, was it 60 Minutes? CBS News, something, they were talking about grip strength and how
Yeah,
important grip strength was as a measure. And I know you have some opinions on that.
I do.
So, can you, I would love for you to unpack that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, grip strength is has been identified as one of those strong predictors of longevity, function as you get older. Um, and so a lot of the influencers, I think, though, they're kind of taking it the wrong way. They're saying, okay, since grip strength is the thing, that we need to do things like bar hangs and work on our grip strength. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if you have forearms like Popeyes. That's not going to help you get out of your chair. It's not going to help you climb stairs. It's not going to, allow you to hike hills. And so the kind of mistake is thinking that grip strength is the goal. It's not just, it's just a predictor. And it's correlated with overall body strength, which makes it a strong predictor of longevity. So what we really want to do is, if you have low grip strength, work on leg strength.
Mm,
That's really what we should be doing, right? So work on overall strength. Don't just think, oh, I'm going to get a strong grip and that's going to help me live longer. And again, that's what some of the where some of the recommendations go about grip strength. It's just a marker for overall body strength.
yeah. So I would love for you, because you brought up the brain stuff too.
Hmm.
Can you speak to, like, when we look at cardio, how does that help your brain? When we talk about strength and
Hmm.
leg strength, for example, how does that help our brain? When we talk about balance training, how does that help our brain? Obviously, falling down doesn't help our brain, right?
Hmm.
But I'm thinking in other ways too, in terms of. So, could we tie it specifically to brain health?
Absolutely. The research is exploding in this area because now we understand the importance of physical movement for brain health and for cognitive abilities. And so all three of those as interventions have shown improvements in even cognitive scores, as well as brain health markers and some other aspects that we look at. But they also, all three kind of work through different pathways, which
Yeah,
is interesting. So aerobic exercise, it is really valuable for improving a certain brain factor called brain derived neurotrophic factor. And that's kind of a growth hormone for the brain, in essence. It's like fertilizer for the brain. People call it miracle growth for the
right.
brain. And it
BDNF, you
really,
hear it, BDNF. Yep.
it's all over the place, right? Because that is like preparing the soil for those brain cells to grow and to thrive. And so it's improves blood flow, oxygenation, clearance of waste products. All aerobic exercise has a great impact on the brain. Um, Strength training has a similar but different effect. So it's really good at improving another growth factor, which is called insulin-like growth factor 1 in the brain, IGF-1. That's a completely different pathway to help stimulate the brain and help it to grow like it should. And so again, we come back to, it shouldn't be cardio or strength.
Mm,
From a brain health perspective, you should do both, because the two different pathways mean that, all right, aerobic exercise does this, strength does this, but if you do them at the same time, now you're here, right? They kind of, the benefits stack to a certain degree on top of each other. So those are primarily working through what we consider physiological mechanisms, right? The hormones and the growth factors, the blood flow. When we look at balance training is a little bit different, because think about anything you do that requires coordination. Okay. Well, that's your brain, right? Your brain is controls coordination. Your brain is processing so much information that's coming in right now. So I can feel, my feet on the floor, where my legs are crossed. I can feel my butt in the chair, the pad against my back. I'm listening, I'm hearing, I'm smelling. Like, all these things are coming in, your brain is processing that. All of those inputs are critical for balance. So your brain processes them, says, okay, well, what should I do? And then starts to stimulate motor output or movement. And so in situations in which there um, is a potential fall risk or a hazard, you've got to process that information very quickly. And so that's what balance training does. It helps your brain to take all those sensory signals, process them, and then have an appropriate motor output. So all three are working on different pathways in order to improve your brain.
hmm. Okay. So, and I think when I think about like strength training, I also think in terms of like insulin resistance. When we talk about modifiable risk factors for dementia. I think big ones that come up are like high blood pressure, um, prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is basically insulin resistance, right? High cholesterol is another one. Inflammation is another one. And I think when we talk about strength training and the muscles, it can really actually help with insulin resistance as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, again, if you think of it like a field, and you're trying to have a field that grows these plants, which are going to be your nerves, right? Then you need healthy soil, you need the right environments, and you don't want weeds coming in and kind of ruining that. And that's what some of these other factors like hypertension or insulin resistance do. They're kind of like weeds in the field. And so when you're following a good aerobic and strength and balance program regularly, you're basically having now a nice, healthy soil and environment for your brain cells to grow. And so keeping those weeds out is really critical. So yes, it's those things are obviously good for overall health. And it's interesting how a lot of these diseases are connected. So for example, you mentioned diabetes
Yeah.
as a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And some people will call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. You know, there's a glucose metabolism issue. But brain health is really, really closely associated with heart health.
Yeah.
So all these cardiovascular risk factors, they're also Alzheimer's disease risk factors. And so it's Dean Ornish, who's done some revolutionary research in the reversal of cardiovascular disease. He also did an interventional trial looking at the reversal of Alzheimer's disease, so where he's got diet, exercise, stress reduction, social support in his program. Um, he has a really interesting theory that all these diseases are really one disease manifesting in different ways. It's his unifying theory
Hmm.
of disease. And it makes a lot of sense because they're so intricately linked together. So the more things you can do to just have good metabolic and heart health, the brain is going to be happy about that for
Yeah.
sure.
I don't know if I agree with that unifying theory. I do think like we have different genetics.
Hmm.
And to the extent that because of your genetics, are you, upregulating or downregulating? Are you turning things on and off? It will manifest differently in that way. I could see
It does
that.
manifest differently, yes. But if you also look at the interventions that are recommended from a lifestyle perspective, you're going to find a whole lot of the exact
Yeah.
same recommendations for heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, the same thing. So
Yeah.
they obviously have to be working on some similar pathways and processes within your body that's kind of producing these pathophysiologies.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so funny how we're always trying to reduce it down to
Yes.
specific mechanisms of action.
Hmm.
And like when the GLP-1s came out, it's like, okay, it's not just this one thing. There's all these things. We understand some, but not all, right? We're still like
Right.
continuing to discover. So I would imagine when it comes to exercise and the different forms of exercise, it's working on multiple things at a time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I love the way you actually helped us understand there's sort of creating the environment, the conditions for growth, right? But at the same time, when we talk about the risk factors, it's like the weeds. I love that
Yeah.
metaphor or analogy. Which one is it? I guess it depends on the
It's
language,
an
right?
analogy.
Yeah. So, um, where was I going to go with this? So when we look at, you had a fourth category, which
Hmm.
was around stimulating the brain, right?
Right.
Cognitive games. Can you go into that a little more?
I can. There's a lot of robust research now that supports the role of cognitive stimulation for positive brain health. And you would say, well, yeah, that makes sense, duh. But there was actually a time when this was really in question and the evidence wasn't showing that quite a bit. But now we realize that that's an important factor, especially when it comes to brain health, cognitive function, prevention of Alzheimer's disease. And so that can be done either by itself. So classically, people are going to do things like Sudoku, crossword puzzle, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really, really low level stimulation, to be honest. That's not the most effective thing to do. It's easy to do, And that's probably why it's not quite as effective. You need to do things that are challenging, that are novel, that stimulate your brain in different ways. So there are some computer programs that certainly do that better now. But you can do anything. We kind of come back to the physical part. Anything that really ties your cognitive abilities in with a movement, the better it is. And so balance training is actually stimulating for the brain. That's why Tai Chi has shown in study after study to improve cognitive abilities in older adults. It's not just improving balance and strength, it's improving cognition. And if you ever tried Tai Chi, have you tried it? Have you done
Mm-mm.
it? Okay.
Actually, I think maybe once. Once.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting because it's obviously slow, but it's very specific movements, positions, postures that flow into the next one. And I mean, you got to be there, right? You have to be focused. She's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with my hands and my feet? And I'm moving and I'm trying to breathe. And now where does this go? Like, and so that's why people practice it for years and years and years to try to master it because there's so many different elements to it. That is very stimulating to your brain. We see the same type of effect with dance. Dance is very good for your brain. And the best dance is the one you don't know yet. It's the one you're learning because that's novelty, right? So your brain is trying to figure out, okay, again, where do I step? How do I move? Where am I supposed to turn? I got to listen to the music. Am I on beat? Am I off beat? Like all those things, your brain is just on fire trying to learn. And if you've done the same dance for decades and you know it down pat, that's not as good for you. I mean, it's good from a movement perspective, but it's not stimulating your brain because your brain's got that down pat. It's like when you drive somewhere and you drive the same route and you completely tune out, but somehow you end up in the same spot. You're like, how did I get here? Like, I don't even remember doing it.
Right.
You went on autopilot. And that wasn't very stimulating to your brain. Your brain figured it out. There's a really great classic study of taxi drivers in the UK. And they have a very complex road system. And this was before they had GPS or anything.
Right.
So they had to learn like tens of thousands of route combinations to get places. And London was notorious for road closures. So where you think you're going one way and now you can't do it. And, now you got to figure out, well, how do I reroute and get around? And so even those taxi drivers were rather sedentary people, that stimulus caused them to score pretty high on cognitive functioning scores because of that. So that novelty, that complexity is really valuable, but especially if you can tie it into physical movement.
So actually, the thing that triggered me to want to invite you, timing wise, was you were doing a presentation on dual tasking. And I think we can also talk about marbles in this context. But can you explain what dual tasking is relative to what we were just talking about?
Absolutely. So in essence, it's thinking and moving at the same time. It's having a physical challenge or task at the same time that you have a cognitive challenge or task. And these tasks can be related to one another or they could be completely separate. So, for example, if a classic test that we do is called the timed up and go, and literally you'll get up out of a chair, walk to a line, turn around, walk back to your chair, normal walking speed. And then they'll do the cognitive variation in which now you're counting backwards by sevens from 100 while you're walking. So you're walking and you're counting backwards. So that would be a dual task condition. That's a real life thing that we do, right? We are moving and thinking at the same time. And if you're having to stop what you're doing to think about something, that's an indication you don't have good dual task capability, right? That's a cognitive issue that we need to work on. And a lot of people do that. But anything that requires moving and thinking at the same time. So again, it could be a counting, a spelling, a recall, a math problem. It can be almost anything that you're having to maintain a physical movement at the same time as a cognitive movement.
But those were unrelated, right? Versus when you were talking about dancing and whether or not you were moving to the beat, that would be considered related?
Those are related,
Okay.
yes, because your counting backwards doesn't isn't tied to like how you're stepping or walking or which way you're going, but dancing is, right? You're learning a specific pattern, coordination, sequence of movements. Sports is an example of its primarily related activities, right? So you're surveying the field, like in soccer, the ball's over there, but it's starting to move down the field. Well, what's my position? Where do I need to be? Where are the other players? How do I orient myself? You are physically moving in response to all that stimuli that's coming in. And so those are two related cognitive tasks. So actually sports is one way to really do dual tasking almost naturally.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then how does that relate to marbles? Like, what do you have going on there?
Yeah. So, since in the research literature, dual task types of training has shown to have superior results on cognition than doing your physical and your cognitive separately.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to think about kind of a pyramid, doing some cognitive exercise, let's say, at 10 a.m., and then doing some aerobic exercise later in the day at 3 p.m. Well, you're doing both of them in the same day. That's good. That's good. You're doing both of them. But if you're actually to stack them and do your cardio exercise and then immediately do your cognitive exercise, you would get better results cognitively. But then if you were to do the same two things at the exact same time, that's in dual tasking, the results are even better. So what we're seeing is that dual task has the potential for being one of the most effective ways to improve cognition. And the reason being is because you are stimulating body and brain simultaneously. So you're improving the blood flow, you're improving the BDNF potentially, and now you're actually using your brain to make those neural connections, right? Because again, if you think about the crops that are growing, you don't want them to just sprout in the nerves. You got to connect them, right? They have to connect with each other and you have to use them, or else your brain is going to do something called pruning. And it's going to say, oh, you don't need that part of your brain. You're not using it. So let me get rid of it because I'm going to use those resources elsewhere. Same thing happens with your muscle, right? If you don't use your muscle, your body says, why would I maintain 20 pounds of muscle in your legs? You're not using them. I only need 10. So let's get rid of that muscle, right? And so that's what happens in your brain as well. So dual tasking really is a way to stimulate the brain more beneficially, get more out of it than if you were to do those things separately. Now, within that kind of paradigm of dual tasking, if we do like counting or spelling or something, that's a very kind of no technology kind of approach. Like you don't need to do it. Well, there's limitations to that because what we really want people to do is decision making
Hmm.
and tap into what we call executive functioning skills. And that's where more of what we're going to call exergaming comes into play, where the technology comes into play. So what we've done at Marbles is we've selected a variety of
Wait, we should tell
technology.
people what marbles is.
Okay. But we use a variety of dual task technology in order to improve both physical and cognitive ability at the same time. So Marbles Fitness is really a new model in the health and fitness space that's focused on that brain body connection
Okay.
by dual tasking. So that's primarily what we focus on. So we are a gym or a fitness studio in a loose sense, but you come in, you're not going to see all these weights and weight stacks and all this equipment everywhere. It's very specific on we have a bike that does cardio, obviously, but you're playing games at the same time. You're doing cognitive challenges. So you're moving the handles, you're pushing buttons. You are, in essence, playing a video game while you're cycling.
Hmm.
We have people that you don't have to be interested in video games. You don't have to have a history of video games, but that environment engages you and it stimulates your brain. And I'm telling you that if you don't like to do cardio, like I don't like to do cardio, then do dual tasking because the 10 minutes will go by so much faster
Hmm.
than anything else. So then we have a balance system that we use. And then we have kind of an open system, which we can do strength training, power, mobility, balance, cardio, kind of anything on it. But the technology allows us to do more complex types of decision making skills. So I just kind of give you one example of this on our unit called the Dividot Senso. So it's like a force plate you stand on. So do you remember Dance Dance Revolution?
Mm-hmm.
Or you step in different directions. So you're in the middle, And what's going to happen on the screen is it's going to give you a stimulus, and that's going to determine whether you step forwards, backwards, right, or left. So a simple version of that is one of the dots on the screen turns red, and that means step forward. And you try to do that as fast as possible. But what it will also do, it'll give you challenges where you have to make the right decision quickly on which direction to step. So it's not just, oh, it turned red, that's easy. But there's some other game you're playing that's going to determine, all right, now which direction do I need to go? So you've got to think through it very quickly and then step in the right direction. So that's executive function or decision making skills. And that's related to balance because you're having to move very quickly at the same time.
And so does your game or does this game also adjust for the person's level so that,
It does.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
So depending on the system, they kind of do this differently. But one of the things I like about the balance system that I was just talking about is it adjusts to your performance
okay,
every single time you play it. So if you get on and you're doing really well, it gets harder. So then you start to make mistakes, which is where you want to be. If you're not doing so well, then it stays right where it is, or it gets even a little bit easier, again, to adjust to your performance that day or to differentiate between, somebody that may have a lot of cognitive issues and somebody who's very sharp.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I literally just this morning, William Shatner from Star Trek
Hmm.
fame, right? And TJ
Yep.
Hooker, he's 95 now, and he
Yeah.
was on Good Morning America with his daughter, and they had both battled stage 4 cancer, and they are now cancer free. And listening to William Shatner at 95, first, you wouldn't know from listening to him that he's 95.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like, in terms of his voice isn't, like when people get older, sometimes you hear like a lot of the depth,
Yeah.
something changes, right? It sounds,
Hmm.
it's drier. You don't really hear that as much in his voice, but then also just the pace at which he's talking and the rate at which he's thinking. He's one of those super agers.
Yeah.
Yeah, at 95. You just see he's got so much life and joy in him still. There's still curiosity, which,
Yeah. That's great. You got to
which,
love to see that.
yeah. And I actually think so. A lot of that curiosity does come from the ability to keep processing information too. Because if you
Hmm.
can't, you get frustrated, right? And then you don't want to do it anymore. So
Hmm.
I think it becomes the use it or lose it spiral, if you will.
Well, it certainly does. And you talked about retirement at the beginning, and that's the danger of retirement is not just from the physical decline that can occur because people sit around and don't do anything, but the mental/cognitive decline really accelerates in a lot of people because you go from being in an environment where you're stimulated, you're thinking, you're talking to people, you're solving problems, whatever it might be, and then you go to hanging out and maybe consuming, video or TV, or maybe you're reading books, and that's okay, that's fine. But you lose that, and then you lose your energy and you lose your creativity, and all of those are tied to good cognitive performance and mental health as you get older. So, like William Shatner, is he following some amazing lifestyle? I don't know, probably not. But the fact he's been so engaged, he's still working, he's still like
Hmm.
vibrant and out there doing things. He just didn't retire and go by the wayside. That's got to be a big factor in why he's like this at the age of 95.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's what you do with the time that you have, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Okay, so
Mhm.
if we talk about um let's do this. Like in an ideal world, so how much time would you want someone to set aside for moving, for exercising?
Well, it depends on how you're doing it. For one, from
And
my
that you're capable,
formal,
right? Like you
yeah,
don't have injuries, so we do want to tailor it to the individual. But let's say
yeah.
you're able to move, blah blah blah.
Well, here's what I'd say: if you're going to formally exercise, and that's going to do, your cardio, your strength and power, integrate dual tasking, do balance, all that, then you should probably be in a program where an hour a day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
I would really love to see people there. But then to be active outside of that. And that's also really important because the research is on this has become increasingly clear. And I've got issues with clients that do this is they get into a good exercise program and they do nothing the rest of the day.
Mm.
Right? And they sit. And that exercise, it's hard to negate those other 23 hours of doing nothing. So not just formal exercise, but just be active, and that's physically active. So garden, play sports and travel and have active hobbies rather than just seated hobbies and find ways to be engaged. And that will magnify your results and keep you moving well, into late adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very, very helpful,
Hmm.
actually. Because like when I think about tennis, so I have lessons twice a week and then I like practice or play one more
Hmm.
day a week. And when I'm actually working out, so to speak, then I'm actually doing strengthening and conditioning
Yeah.
specific to the movements for tennis. So it
Yeah.
gives me kind of like a plan for why am I doing this? Again, that functional component, it's supporting
Hmm.
me in tennis, right?
Yeah.
It can support you in navigating five set of stairs, right? My aura ring's always telling me, you know, what you'll be able to do in 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all
Well,
right.
it's unfortunate how many things people give up as they get older because they do become a little bit more difficult or their knees hurt or their back hurts and they just kind of get out of everything. And my guess is you play tennis because you enjoy it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you love it and it's fun and that keeps you going, right? And so many people don't have that. And which is one reason why I say, well, get out and play pickleball or do something. Find something that you're like, oh, I like this. I can see myself doing this. It's fun. It's social. It keeps me active. That's a part of this equation too.
Yeah. Well, actually, so for tennis, I think when I was in my teens and 20s, I was always like, the idea of playing tennis just sounded really interesting to me. And I might watch TV, I think this is back in the days of like McEnroe and Edberg. And it just looked like it'd be a lot of fun. Everett and Navratilova, right? I watched,
Hmm.
but that generation of tennis players. And in my 20s, though, I couldn't afford tennis lessons. So my friends would go out there, right? We'd go out there and we'd spend more time um, apologizing to people in the next court because our ball had gone over there
Yeah.
than we weren't actually playing,
Yeah.
right? But we'd be running around and we'd be outside and we'd be social. And I actually didn't start. So for people watching or listening to this, right? I didn't start tennis until I think it was 2021 after like the pandemic. And I remember being out for a walk and I actually saw this one coach that was giving lessons and I approached him because I kind of liked how he was doing stuff, right? So that's kind of how it started. So I don't want folks to think, oh, well, you were a tennis player before. And
Right.
so now,
Yeah.
right, and I knew about brain health and learning something new already from my interactions with you. Actually, I
Mhm.
remember Mark Middleton at one of the summit meetings, where he
Mhm.
was talking about a 70-year-old who had learned how to pole vault. And when you looked at his brain, how healthy and full it was, right? Like you weren't seeing the atrophy. Um, and I seem to remember he also talked about something to do with the corpus callosum, that if you were doing things where you crossed the midline, that
Mhm.
seemed to also make a difference.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I think about kind of these little details when it comes to what I'm doing. But we talked about if you have an hour to spend and what to what to spend your time doing and then to stay active during the day. What if you don't have an hour? What if you actually are like still working, um, or you're just busy and what's that minimum dose, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, consistency, it trumps everything else, honestly. So again, if you can do 30 minutes 5 days a week, that you can still get a great program in. And on that, you can alternate. Like you could do 30 minutes of cardio one day, 30 minutes of strength training, kind of go back and forth. Um, Strength training you can get done pretty quickly, so you can integrate balance in there as well if that's something you need. And then take time on the weekends to, again, do more active stuff and get out and use all those skills, like in a tennis or in hiking or doing something that then gets you to move around, robustly. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make from a cardio perspective is they walk, and there's nothing wrong with walking, but they walk and they're really walking at a low intensity. So they're
Mhm.
walking and having long conversations. Great for socialization, not so great for your health and fitness, right? So you really want to get to that moderate intensity threshold that you were talking about. And if you don't have as much time, then doing some of those high intensity intervals, it's going to require more effort, but you will basically get the same benefit or more out of 15 minutes than you could out of 30. So you can pack a lot in. And that's, people often think, oh, I got to go to the gym. I don't have a full hour. I can't exercise. No, if you've got 15 minutes, outside, you can get to do a high intensity interval training program very easily, right? So you just have to be creative in how you approach it.
So, does it have to be like 15 to 30 minutes? Can you do shorter bouts? Is there like 5, 10 minutes? I always tell people when they're first starting, like all movement counts,
Hmm.
right? So, and I know people have said 10-minute bouts, but I think that's also because the researchers probably set it up as 10 minutes. But is there
Right.
kind of a minimum? Do we know?
We don't know if there's a minimum. I
Oh,
mean, there have been studies, like you said, that have done these 5 to 10 minute bouts and have shown improvement. And we don't think there's any difference between doing 6 5-minute bouts versus one 30-minute bout as long as the intensity is equal, right? But there's been lots of studies and where literally people just do every 30 minutes their alarm goes off and they walk up the stairs and back down. Or I mean literally that's
yeah,
it. Or they get out of their chair and do 10 squats and sit back down and keep going. So we don't really know what that minimum threshold is. We just know your body loves to move. It
yeah,
loves it when you move. And so the more you can do, the better.
yeah, yeah. So that's the takeaway is it's still about all movement counts. We would like to see you do a variety of movements. That
Mhm.
helps. I think the body, ultimately, it's like the body adapts to what you're doing, if you will. And at the same time, it likes to conserve energy. Like we are
Mhm.
biologically wired to want to conserve energy. If you're not using it and I don't need to expend the calories, I'm not going to support that. So unless you keep using it, I'm going to get rid of it, right? Whether it's in the
Yep.
brain and pruning or whether it's muscles. So it's how do you structure your day to get more movement in, I guess would
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
consistently. Yeah.
And I think also a point that I try to make with people too is it's not all about your age. Okay. We know age related changes are happening, but it does have to do with your health status and your disease conditions. So, if let's say you're healthy, no medications, but I'm 60. Yes, you need to move. You should exercise, right? You should do these activities. But if you're the same age and you already have diabetes and you already have high blood pressure and you have a family history and now it becomes less about, okay, just do something to move. You really need to be thinking about, I need to have a formal approach because for me, that's what it's going to take. Like if I really want to have a healthy future, then I need to be more concerted about my efforts. I need to be more consistent. I need to have a better plan, as opposed to somebody who literally has no health problems at all, who's maybe just thinking about preventing some things down the road. So the earlier that you have these disease conditions, markers, risk factors, then the more seriously you need to think about your exercise program and your approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, when I work with clients, one of the things I go through with them is I do a values exercise where
Mm,
I have a big list of values and I ask them, what are your core values? And we go through this, and usually with the list, it's pretty easy to get it down to like 15 or 20.
mhm.
And then I start going, what are your core values? Can we get this list down to like 3 to 5? Okay. And what I found really interesting is that oftentimes health doesn't actually make the list.
That's
It's
right.
really interesting. People, as long as you're able to do the things you're doing, it's like you get to take your health for granted, if you
Hmm.
will. And so I think what you're saying here to me is also to recognize maybe you are taking your health for granted. And once you realize that, I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm actually more just trying to shine a light on this. Oftentimes in our society, we're not taught actually to value health the same so financial health is different. We're educated all the time. Make sure you save money, you have a 401k, right? That you want to have the financial health for your retirement. And so what about physical health? Do we have those kinds of metrics, if you will? Right? What's in your bank account, so to speak? It might not be as easy to measure. And so as a society, those are things that I think folks are trying to figure out. But so
Hmm.
I want folks to think about when you look at your values, how much do you value health? And if you value health, how are you doing things to intentionally create that health? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that you can enjoy your retirement, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
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 I see that all the time when it comes to brain health. This we kind of talked about that a little bit. If you look at the surveys, um, future brain health is the biggest concern that older adults have, like fear of Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. But then when you kind of look back, okay, so what are you doing about it? Then there's there's like, well, I'm saying it's important, but I'm not really doing what is necessary to match that importance. So I think understanding, well, what do you value? And if you value, I want to continue to be engaged with my family for as long as possible in a productive way and go to weddings and all sorts of things. That's another way to look at I value my brain health,
Yeah.
right? And that can be a little bit more motivating when you put it into the real situational terms like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think this actually goes back to something Mark Middleton said, which was it depends on how much you believe your future health is something you can influence.
Hmm.
So I hear a lot of people talk
Very
about
true.
things like you have good genes. The reason you
Hmm.
are the way you are is because you have good genes. And I'm like, it's not just about luck. It
Yeah.
really isn't. You want to think about it like the game of poker, right? And it's
Right.
about not just the hand you're dealt, but how you play the game too. So this is our game of life. This is right. You get to come up with the rules. You get to structure it. So I want this conversation to be more about empowerment, where you now can think about how am I structuring my day? Do I have an hour? And in that hour, how am I moving my body? How am I moving my body during other parts of the day? If I don't know what to do, right? There are resources. You can hire a personal trainer. You can go check out Marbles Fitness. Where are you located?
Well, we're a franchise.
Okay.
Our headquarters is here in Arkansas, and then we have one franchise location that's opened up in Fishers, Indiana.
Okay. So if you're there, that's definitely something to go check out. But I think the YMCA also has now some dual tasking
They
stuff,
do.
right?
Yeah, YMCA has really bought into it.
Yeah. So there are lots of options. I think the it really is to come up with a plan, make it doable and execute. And if you're looking for more information, there are more podcast episodes on this. You can reach out to me if you want to talk to Cody. I'm happy to connect you. Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
for
game.
sure.
Yeah. So, um, I think this is a good place for us to sort of land this plane. Is there anything I didn't cover that you think we want to make sure folks know?
I don't think so. I think it's been good.
Okay. All right. Well, I do have a tradition on this podcast where when I have a guest, I ask if you have a favorite quote or one that's particularly relevant to what we talked about today that you would like to share with folks and take us out.
Okay. Well, I'm going to end with one of my favorite kind of Stephen Covey quotes or principles, and that's begin with the end in mind. And I use this with a lot of older adults, and we've talked about this, Amy. We've discussed it. Of well, who is it or where is it that you want to be in 10 or 20 years, right? And when you look forward and say, well, this is how I want to be when I'm 90. Not everybody wants to live to 120. That usually doesn't make the list. But at 90, I want to still be sharp and I want to be able to do this and I want to be able to do that. And when you then take that image, you say, okay, well, here's where you are. What is it going to take to get there? And just like everything else, just start planning to get there. And you said, exercise is very, very powerful in that journey. A lot of things you can do to try to reach it, but exercise is really non-negotiable and moving is a non-negotiable. So begin with where is it that I want to be? What is it that I want to do, when I grow up and when I'm older? And then build towards that and build it one step at a time. You don't have to solve all your problems right now. And even if you do have limitations like, but I already have this joint replacement or this injury or this problem or this frozen shoulder. Okay, so that's a limitation you got to work around. That shouldn't prevent you from continuing on, this journey. And I think about a video I saw recently. There's a fitness competition called High Rocks. It's very similar to kind of the CrossFit games. And there was a guy who had a stroke and he was almost completely paralyzed on his left side of his body. So his arm really didn't work, and it was up against his body. His left leg was in a brace and he's doing the High Rocks game. So he's literally doing burpees one-handed, just getting on the floor, getting back up, hopping, having a medicine ball, trying to push it up, all one-handed. It's just so inspirational. And a lot of older adults who are way more capable than he is, then go, well, I can't do it because X, Y, Z. So don't let those limitations stop you. Really reach for that future person that you want to be.
Great message to end with. So thank you so much for making the time again. This
Well,
was
Amy, thank you for finally having me on.
and if folks have any questions, make sure you hit the comments below and we're going to read them and we'll answer all of them. All right. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you.